To Know Christ, a television ministry of the Lutheran Church of Peace in Platteville, Wisconsin. Here's your host, Reverend Jeff Pedersen.
Well, we are continuing our series on leadership. And today the topic is champions. If you want to be a good leader, you surround yourself with champions. I was a pitcher on the high school baseball team. And I remember this one game, I was getting rather frustrated. I think I was walking a lot of batters. I had it in my mind that I needed to strike out everybody. And as our coach could see that I was agitated, he called a timeout. He went running out to the mound to visit with me, and he tried to settle me down. And he just simply said, "Jeff, you don't have to do it all on your own." And he said, "Look, you've got 8 other players around you, and they are good players. And so all he said was, you pitch strikes. And if somebody hits the ball, more than likely one of these guys will get the batter out. And if for some reason, they get a few hits and they score some runs, well, it doesn't matter as long as we score more runs than they score." And so with that advice, that's what I did. We were conference champions that year. Conference champions because we had a team of champions, and that makes the difference. People who've got good attitudes, people who see themselves as being the team, people who are working for the good of the team. And they keep working hard, doing all that they can as individual players for the sake of the team to be successful. And so I mentioned about being the pitcher on the baseball team, but I've also been a pastor now for almost 26 years. And even after 26 years, a lot of times I still have that mindset. We are born and we are raised and we're programmed a certain way. And a lot of times that has been my attitude. As pastor of the church, I think I have got to do it all. And so I've worked hard. I've tried to get skilled in all kinds of areas to say, well, I'm all set. I can do all of the work. And I hate to kind of have to admit this, but the church sometimes can have that attitude as well. Saying, "Pastor, we have hired you. We have called you. This is why we are paying you a salary, so that you can do the work of all 600 of us." And they will call me thinking, "And Jeff, you're just the guy who can do it." And so there I go at it. But here again, like a baseball team that's going to be successful, the same thing with a church. If the pastor, in a sense, is going to be successful in whatever successful means, the pastor is going to have to activate the whole church around him or her. And that is the success, is when you got everybody working. You might have a very successful pastor that's working as an individual, saying, "I'm doing all the work of the church," but really, what has the church gained? The whole church needs to be activated. That's God's design for the church. As we think about what is written in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, saying that the church is the body of Christ. If I just had one part of my body working, is my body going to be able to function and do all the things that need to be done in a day? No, I need all the body parts working, and so that's the way it is with the church. If the church is going to succeed at the mission that God has called the church to do, then the whole church needs to be activated, working and growing. And so I read from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. "It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith, and in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ." And so here again, our understanding is that we are all into working and being part, being in the fullness of Christ. And the more that we have working in the church, the fuller that we are going to be. But you notice that the Lord has called a lot of different people to do a lot of different tasks. And not one individual is going to be good at doing all of them. And the thing about the church is that you've got a lot of very talented people there. People who are capable of doing a lot of things. And when you get those people activated, then that is going to be the strength of the church. The pastor will know one's weaknesses. Saying, well, I'm very weak in this area. But you know what? You got John Doe over here and you got Mary Smith who are very strong in these areas. And they are going to make your church strong. Up in Thunder Bay, Ontario, as you look out into Lake Superior, not too far out, there's this big island that they call the Sleeping Giant. And when you look at it, it does look like a sleeping giant. And in some ways, that's the way the church can be. It can be like a sleeping giant. And so it's up to the leader of the church to wake that sleeping giant to say, come on, we're not just going to lie around all of our lives. I mean, after all, we're Christians and we claim to be Christians. We are claimed by God. We are brothers and sisters of Christ, children of God. And Christ has called us not to sit on our hands, but rather to be active, to be working. Larry Bird was a very good basketball player. Basketball player for the Boston Celtics. They won 3 championships, but every year they were successful. They had winning teams every year. I remember once, as Larry Bird was being interviewed, he just simply said, well, you can't win the game if you're sitting on the bench. And so that's the whole thing, that as Christians, we can't be sitting on the bench. Being a Christian is not something for the spectator. It's something where you are out there. You're engaged. You're working. You are part of the whole game plan. And so that's it, is understanding that we do have a game plan, that we have a mission in the church. We have goals that we set. And the more people that we can get involved in that mission and the more people that we have working toward our goals, the better off that we will be. Someone who is a great leader, and maybe arguably one of the greatest leaders in the history of the world, he was the great leader of the Old Testament times, and his name was Moses. Moses was, he's kind of second to none when it comes to leadership. He was a very good leader. But yet, I read this story because as he was leading, there was so much work, and more work was piled up on him to the point where he was getting very frustrated, to the point of burning out. And so I read from Exodus chapter 18, verses 13 through 26. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me. I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and laws." Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them the decrees and the laws and show them the way to live and the duties they are to perform. But select capable men from all people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times. But have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. They will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he did. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Jethro was Moses' father-in-law, and he could see all the work, all the hard work that Moses was doing. Moses was the judge, and all the people were coming with their cases, all their disputes, saying, Moses, you got to listen to this, and you got to settle this dispute. But it got to the point where there were so many people coming that Moses couldn't get them all taken care of in a day. And so what happens? When you have people who are standing around all day, very frustrated, pretty soon they become angry. And pretty soon they're going to look at Moses and say, well, Moses, you may be a great leader, but you're not taking care of us. And so we don't like you anymore. We don't even want you to be our leader anymore. But the whole point here is that Moses had such a workload that he was burning out. And so it is with a leader in the church. If a pastor, for instance, is going to go into a church and just do all of the work, that pastor will burn out. And only to find that the church isn't very strong. And so what God says to Moses, Moses, be a good leader. From the standpoint is that you go and find champions. You go and find capable people and then mentor them, teach them, show them the ropes so that they can be doing a lot of this work. And so as Moses did that, well, Moses was taking care of the real difficult situations, but then these other judges that he appointed then were able to take care of all of the rest of them, and as a result, the people were happy. And so a leader needs to be surrounded by a lot of good people, and I think that some of the things that we need to look at, for instance, in the church, is one of the things is that what are all the needs? As a pastor, for instance, goes into the church, and as the pastor learns the community, as the pastor learns the church, it doesn't take too long before they realize, oh, these are a lot of the needs. These are the things that have to be done. And also, the leader is also mindful of the mission of the church, saying that this is our mission statement. So based on our mission, and based on the needs of the community and of the congregation, and based on the vision that we have now as far as exercising or now strategizing as far as how we are going to pursue our mission, and then setting goals that we can attain, that these are the people that we need to have in place. And so a lot of times what is helpful is that we have job descriptions to say that this is the job that needs to be done. We need to have somebody in this position, and job descriptions are good because the person who is hired or the person who is called or assigned understands that this is what the church needs for you to be doing. These are the expectations that we have of you. And then that's helpful then to the person who is called to this position, because then they know what the expectations of him or her are, but then they also understand, what they can now expect from the church. All the things that will be provided, the things that, to equip the person and to say, okay, this is what, because it's frustrating for a worker, as they're working, saying, well, I really don't know. I've been called to do this, but I really don't know exactly what it is that I'm called to do. And so pretty soon they get frustrated, and now they are starting to do work in areas that really they're not called to do, and then that gets the congregation, the church all frustrated, and pretty soon you got a bad working relationship between this person, the staff, and the rest of the members of the church. And so having spelled out job descriptions are very good. Also setting boundaries. When you get people who are called into different areas of the church, well, you do work together. But you have to understand that there are different positions in the church. And so I know how very frustrating it is when the person who is in charge, for instance, of the altar guild, when you got the organist coming into, where the altar guild person has everything organized and has his or her, all of her supplies, and then all of a sudden the organist just comes in and starts messing around and starts helping oneself to this and that, and then all of a sudden the altar guild person says, well, who's been eating my porridge, so to speak? I had everything all set up and now it's all disrupted. Things that I need to go and to do my work here are now gone. I don't have them. Or as the Sunday school superintendent is going and now just going into the organist area and just going in where the organist has all the music filed and saying, oh, I think we could, we need a song for this, and they just go into, the organist files and then, start just picking out music and taking it. Well, as the organist comes and finds that all of his or her files are all messed up and a lot of their music is gone, how frustrating that is. And then when the secretary of the church goes into where the Sunday school superintendent has all of his or her stuff all organized and basically does the same thing. Do you see where all of a sudden now you've got a lot of people who are very angry at each other because there's been a violation, boundaries have been overstepped. People have overstepped their boundaries, and now there's a lot of frustration. And so that's where people need to know that this is my position and this is your position, and that we are respectful of one another. And so as I think about what I read from Exodus chapter 18 concerning Moses, there were some things that Moses, he saw. That first of all, Moses needed to call people who were very strong in faith. That's the first thing. So as you're looking to call people, as you're looking to surround yourself with champions, the first thing, is this person strong in faith? And here again, that only makes sense, is that you need to call somebody who is not just new in their faith, but somebody who is well seasoned, somebody who has a strong faith and knows the Lord, somebody who has an understanding of the Bible and of theology, who takes time to pray. Because, for instance, if I'm going to a university to take a math class, now here again, I'm not real bad at math, but if I'm going to the university to take a math class, I would expect that my professor has a great deal or has a lot more knowledge about mathematics than I do. I mean, how am I going to learn more if my professor knows less than I do? Okay, so that's part of leadership, is that you are raising up people. You're raising them up in the faith. You are encouraging them. You're strengthening them. And also a person who's strong in faith is going to see that they are accountable to God. They're going to seek the Lord above all other things. They're going to have an understanding as far as who they are and what they are about as a child of God. They are going to be directed by God, inspired by God. And so that's why you needed to have a person who's strong in faith, because you don't want somebody who's just coming along saying, well, I need a job. Okay, then they're going to be oftentimes about themselves. And when difficult situations come about, they're not going to necessarily know how to handle it. And so a person who is a champion is somebody who is self-disciplined. Okay, as far as church work goes, for the most part, you're not punching a clock. Okay, you got a whole day and you got to be able to organize it, and you got to be disciplined to say, okay, this is my task. These are all the things that I need to do. And so how do I structure my day in order to be able to get all this done? Okay, and so self-discipline, but a self-starter. If a person doesn't get up and get going, well, then the day is going to be lost. Things are not going to be done. This person is self-confident, meaning that they know who they are, what they are about. They understand the mission of the church. And so instead of having everybody telling them what to do and having them spin like a top, they can now be directive to say that, no, what I need for you to do is this. And that everybody understands, what this role is. Another thing that was brought out is that Moses needed to call people who are trustworthy. Because again, here working in the church, there's not anybody that's going to be looking over your shoulder all the time. And so when people are called or hired, whatever the case may be here, is that you're given the task to say, this is your job. We have confidence in you. We just expect that we can count on you to be doing this. And so as a person is self-disciplined, as a self-starter, is self-confident, that they will be able to go about their work. They know what their task is. They know what they need to be doing, that they are trustworthy people. I remember when I first started out in the ministry, I went home for lunch. And across the street, our dear neighbors across the street were having some work done on their home. And so they hired, this carpenter firm to come and to do the work. Well, the worker that they sent was a young man who was a member of the church. And not that I was being snoopy. I was just sitting at my dinner table, eating, looking out the window, as I noticed, this young man who was, a very active member of our church, who was working there, and he's working by himself. And I knew that he would have a 30-minute lunch break. But here again, the supervisor was nowhere around. If he wanted to take a 45-minute lunch break, nobody would know. So I was just kind of curious to see. Well, his lunch break was from 12 to 12:30. And as soon as 12:30 came, he was sitting in his truck eating. He got out of his truck and went to work. And I thought, now there's a trustworthy guy. And that's how it is in the church. You need people like this. People who are going to be trustworthy. You don't have to be worrying now, what are they really up to? What are they really doing? You know that they are doing their work. And so this is where a leader will give the champions around them the latitude, the freedom to say, well, this is what you're called to do. And I'm not going to have my thumb over you all day long. You've got the abilities. And in fact, you've got more abilities in this area than I do. That's why you're in this position. And so you can breathe, you can move and have your being. And so that you can accomplish the very things that God has called you to do in this area. A champion is someone who is a team player. I mean, they're not only concerned about getting their own work done, but they're also praying for the other workers. They're trying to be helpful to the other workers. They're showing a lot of respect to them. And one of the things that I find to be so helpful as far as an attitude of a champion, it comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. And this would be Paul's letter that he wrote, defining love. But he says here, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And I think of a leader, people who are working in a church, if they can read 1 Corinthians chapter 13 often, that's a very good thing. But it certainly does describe the attitude that you've got to be a person of love. And that love is that you're going to be patient with people. You're going to be kind with people. And you're not going to be envious of other workers. And nor are you going to be boastful, saying, well, look at me, I'm better than all the rest of you. And that love does not rejoice at wrong. I know there are a lot of people that they love to hear bad news. I don't know why, but that's not love. It's like they rejoice in hearing other people's bad news. Oh, you got a problem. Oh, but inside they're saying, well, I'd really like to hear this. But when somebody is doing well, when they hear of somebody's good news, then they just become jealous. And so we got to flip-flop all of these. We can't be arrogant. We got to be humble. We can't be people who are rejoicing in the wrong, but if somebody is hurting, that we are sympathetic to them, saying, "Oh, how can I be helpful to you?" Or if somebody has done well, I rejoice in that. I think about Paul as he refers to the church as being the body of Christ, that if one is hurting, we all hurt. If one rejoices, we all rejoice. And so, as I think about a champion, there are some things that I think are very important. Number one, a champion doesn't gossip. If there's something going on with other people in the church or on the staff, you don't gossip about it. Okay, but rather so if somebody wants to gossip with you, saying, "Well, I don't think that this is what we should be saying about this person." I think that another thing that a champion does is that it works to resolve problems and not create problems. And so we're not to be agitators, but rather if a problem comes up, we work on it together. We pray for one another. Because here again, prayer doesn't always change the situation, but it changes us. It changes our attitudes. A champion is one who always wants to succeed, understanding that we succeed together. We're on the same team, and whose team is this? It is Jesus' team. We are members of the church. We are working for the same goals, for the same purposes. And so that's the thing, is that I'm here to help strengthen you. And so a champion is somebody who is humble. A champion is somebody who can admit wrong. A champion will oftentimes apologize and say, "I'm sorry. I admit my wrong, and I'm sorry, and I will do my best." And a champion is always working not only to make oneself better, but also trying to raise up those around them. We think about the Apostle Paul. He was certainly a great leader, but he surrounded himself with good people, with champions. And it's something that when we read in Romans chapter 16, it's quite a list. In Romans chapter 16, he names all of the people who have surrounded him in ministry, the champions. How grateful to God he is for all the champions that have surrounded him in ministry. And that's the church, when the leader recognizes that he or she is surrounded with champions.
You've been watching To Know Christ with Reverend Jeff Pedersen, pastor at the Lutheran Church of Peace, Platteville, Wisconsin. Reverend Pedersen's 12-part marriage series, The Tie That Binds, is available as a DVD box set. To learn how you can obtain the DVD box set of The Tie That Binds and its companion book, call KFXB-TV, Dubuque, Iowa, 563-690-1704. Thank you for watching this program. I'm Robert Snyder. Tune in again for To Know Christ.